right, let's try this again.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen and we'll get started. Okay, here we go. Slowly. All
There
right.
we go.
Let me know if you can see that, the myth
Perfect.
of grief and pregnancy loss. We good?
Yep, we're
All
good.
right. So this topic was important to me, and I hope that you will come to see that there are a lot of similarities that we likely have all experienced on our grief journey. Let's see. It's not advancing. So the goals tonight are to discover the truth about grief, and also I want to provide support and permission to move forward to those who have experienced pregnancy loss. This is important to me because as we experienced 4 pregnancy losses, we heard a lot of well-intended platitudes and cliches, telling us what we needed to do and how to move forward. And I kind of took those to heart, and I measured my growth or my healing, as people would like to say, but I disagree with. I wanted to measure that by what I had been told. And I've come to discover that a lot of what I was told was simply myths that I was trying to live up to. So I want to make sure that we discover truth tonight. So the first thing that we want to do is talk about what grief really is. Initially, growing up, before I had my own grief experiences, people would often think that grief is about death, grief is about crying and sadness and isolation. But I want to share several definitions with you about what grief really is. And I think when we put grief in the right perspective, when we have an expanded view of what grief really is, it helps us better to support other people and to receive the support that we need. So the first definition is grief is a normal and natural emotional reaction to a loss or a change of any kind. And there are several words that I want to key into in this definition. Normal and natural. Grief is a normal and natural emotional response. That's important because there's people that have not experienced this pregnancy loss journey, and they're going to gauge how you grieve based on the grief that they've experienced. And grief is as unique as your fingerprint, so they're not going to be the same. But your grief is normal and natural, whatever that looks like for you, normal and natural. The second definition is grief is a conflicting feeling caused by the end of or a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. Again, in this definition, I want to key in on 2 key phrases: the end of or a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. This is important because with the pregnancy and infant loss journey, there are multiple griefs that we experience, and not just the grief of our child. We experience a change in other patterns of behavior in addition to the loss of our child. For example, the end of, we experience the end of that bonding and the relationship that we had with our child. My son Grayson would wake up every morning as my husband left for work, and he would pray over us. As soon as Grayson heard his dad's voice, he responded. It was robust picking. And so not only did I grieve my son, I grieved the end of a familiar pattern of behavior. So grief is not just about death. You can grieve actions, you can grieve behaviors, okay? The next definition of grief, and it's more so a quote, but I think it helps to frame where we're trying to go tonight. And that is, grief is the recognition you've lost someone you love. And Ziegler continues to quote by saying, if there were no love, there would be no grief. So the product of grief is love. The root of grief is love. And so while we've always thought that grief was about sadness and crying, grief is really about love, and it's expressed in different forms. I saved my very favorite definition of grief for last, and I'll share that with you. And that says, grief is a celebration of a good gift from God expressed through tears. Has anybody ever heard grief described like that? Probably no. Grief is a celebration of a good gift from God expressed through tears. I never framed my grief experiences as a good gift from God, and mostly because I wasn't taught that way. And so that's why it's important tonight that we discover not only the myths of grief, but the truth of what grief really is and what it is not. So that's why we're here, to talk about the myths of grief. All right, let's journey a little further into that. The first myth that I want to talk about tonight, and trust me, there are many. I think if I would take a poll from all of you to, hear some of the myths or the commands, the platitudes and cliches that you were given, we could compile a list of 100 easily. But I've simply taken 4 of those to focus on in our 30 minutes together tonight. And the first one is time heals all wounds. I don't know if you want to roll your eyes to this or do a thumbs up if you agree, but time in and of itself does nothing. What time does is it passes. Time only passes. The key to recovery from grief, which I don't think is a wound at all, the key is action. It is what we do with the time that we have is what helps us to journey forward. So one, I want to throw a little bonus in here. I don't believe that you heal from grief. Therefore, I don't believe that grief is a wound. Grief is a normal and natural experience that anyone can have. Anything that you love, you can grieve. So I don't believe that grief is a wound, and I don't believe that grief is healed. I believe that time helps us to journey forward. Okay, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, and you can let me know if you agree. But if you think of the grief experiences that you've had. If you only sat in those experiences, nothing happened. So you have to put action into time if you want to journey forward. And what does that look like? It looks like attending Gathering Hope. It looks like participating in the book club or being a part of a support group. It looks like allowing yourself to be supported by someone who has walked this journey before you. Again, it is what we do within time that helps us to journey forward. That may be time spent with God. It may be time expressing your emotions. Whatever that is, make sure that you incorporate action within time. So that was the myth of grief. The truth is there is no healing agent within time. If you look on your screen and you look between the long hand and the short hand, if you look between the 1 and the 2, there is no healing agent found between the 1 o'clock and the 2 o'clock hour. There is no healing agent found between 5 and 6. Time only passes. What we do within time helps us to journey forward. And again, we move forward by taking the appropriate steps. Now, let's talk about the second myth of grief. And this one, I don't know about you, but I've heard this one more times than I could care to recall, but it is, you really didn't know the baby yet. And I think it's so insensitive, but I've heard it most. I've heard it myself, and I had 3 second trimester losses and 1 full-term stillbirth. But a lot of women in the support group that I lead, especially those that have had very early miscarriage, early first trimester losses, people have said, I don't know why you're so emotional about this. The baby really wasn't even formed. You were only 6 weeks. Why are you hurting so bad? And so I have had moms, come to support group and they're apologizing. They're saying, I'm sorry I'm crying so much. Yeah, I really didn't know the baby, but I'm still hurting. So this myth angers me to no end, because what it says is that life is only valid once you know and hold them, which I completely disagree with. A lot of times people that say, well, I want to say a lot of times, the people that say you really didn't know the baby, of course, they have never walked this road of grief. But the truth is, relationship begins with hopes, dreams, and expectations. For me, I was like 8 years old, and I knew that I wanted to be a mom. So I had a relationship with my dreams, hopes, and expectations before I was old enough to conceive. And so while many of us didn't get a chance to know what our baby's favorite color was, what bottle they preferred, what their favorite sleeping position was, we know the hopes, dreams, and expectations that we had for that child. And while no, we didn't know all of the ins and outs, we knew we had a relationship with what we wanted for them. And those things can be grieved as well. And I hope that makes sense. So the truth is, relationship begins with our hopes, dreams, and expectations. And those are things that you can grieve. And for me, I had everything planned out in my head. I had, what the baby shower was going to be like. I had the names of all my children written out by my home ec class in 9th grade. I had all of it written out. So the death of my children was the death or delay of hopes, dreams, and expectations. And so for those of you that have heard, you really didn't know the baby yet, why are you having such a hard time? I want you to understand that there is no standard gestation and pregnancy where it's okay to grieve a little bit harder. It's okay whether it was you were pregnant for 2 days before the miscarriage or whether your baby died 2 days after birth. That does not matter. Time does not validate your connection to your hopes, dreams, and expectations. So operate in that truth that you can grieve hopes, dreams, and expectations, although you did not intimately know the likes and preferences of your child. The next myth is you're young. You can just try again. I would love to know how many of you have heard that, but I'm sure it's the majority of the women that are here in the room tonight. This to me is the replacement syndrome. So if you have a favorite pair of shoes and you lose one, you can just go to Macy's and buy another pair, right? That's what this feels like when people say you're young, you can just try again. Like you lost a baby, you can just try again and have that same baby again. This myth does not validate the fact that there was a life that is no more. This myth does not validate the fact that there were plans for that child that can never be anymore. And of course, you can always try again, but it is not with the same child. It's not with the same outcome. You can go back to Macy's and you can buy that new another pair of the black stilettos that you've had in the past, but it's different with a child. You cannot replace life. You cannot replace a life. If someone were in a horrible accident and they lost an arm, you wouldn't say, you're young, you can just get another arm. We don't do the replacement syndrome when it comes to life. We cannot do it. And the truth that I want to share with you tonight is youthfulness does not guarantee fruitfulness. So there are many of us that experience the death of our children when we were young. My daughter died when I was 27. And of course, yes, we could try again, and we did. But there are no guarantees. No matter how young you are, loss is always a possibility. And while we hope that the probability of that is very slim, the truth is there are no guarantees. So I was young, yes, at my first loss. I was 27. I was 28 with my second loss, 29 with my third loss. So that myth that you're young, you can just try again, absolutely. You can try again, but that does not guarantee an outcome. It does not guarantee an outcome that you will take home a baby. And it's painful. This is painful to hear because it totally dismisses the fact that there is grief associated with it. I have some very dear friends who have been on a journey of infertility for years. And people keep asking, you don't have any children yet? Y'all are so young. And without saying, we've been trying, we've had IVF that failed or whatever. People just say, you're young, keep trying. Or if they say we've had a loss, you're young, try again. That is not helpful. It's not helpful. So one of the things that we can say in response when we are given, this myth that we're young, we can try again, that youthfulness is not a guarantee of fruitfulness. And the last myth that we want to talk about is probably my favorite, and that is to be strong. Excuse me. A quick question. I would love to know how many of you have received an award for being the strong grieving mother. Not me. I haven't seen any awards at the cemetery where my son is buried. I haven't seen any awards for mothers or fathers that have been strong on this journey. And I'm not sure what the premise is for saying to be strong to people that are probably at the deepest, darkest point in their life, that when they're gripped to the core, people rub you on the back and say, be strong. My purpose and challenge to you, I'm going to ask you to be human. You can be human or you can be strong. The choice is yours. Being human could look like being weak, and that's okay. There is nothing wrong with our weaknesses. Many people are told to be strong because it makes those that are supporting us, it comforts them because they don't know really how to support a grieving mom or dad that is completely falling apart. So it's easier to rub you on the back and tell you to be strong because I really don't know what to say to you. So I'll tell you to be strong. And in essence, I'm saying, don't cry on me, don't fall apart, just hold it together. And in doing so, many of us have been untrue to ourselves. We have told ourselves, we've stood in the mirror and we've said, I've got to be strong. My son's birthday is coming up. I've got to hold it together and I've got to be strong. That is such a myth. There is no need to be strong. There's no prerequisites for facing another day with however much strength you have. You do not have to be strong. You have to be human. You have to be honest with yourself and honest with your emotions. And the truth is, being being honest with yourself and honest with your emotions, that may make other people uncomfortable. But your priority is not the comfort of other people. Your priority is being true to yourself and finding a way to journey forward. And in your journey forward, people will not understand your grief, and that is okay. That is okay. So the truth about this be strong myth is you don't have to be strong for others. If they don't know how to support you, it's okay. That is okay. But one of the scriptures that came alive for me during our grief, our intense grief experiences was 2 Corinthians 12:9. It came alive for me. I've known the scripture since I was a little girl. I was raised in church and I could quote it, but this scripture came alive to me that says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. And so I really was trying to be strong. I was trying to hold it together and cry only in my bathroom so that, my husband wouldn't see me. Or when I went back to work, I tried to be strong so my coworkers wouldn't see me and they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I tried to be strong for everybody else, and I realized I'm really forfeiting the strength of God. There is a strength available to me when I make the divine exchange, when I am at my weakness, at my weakest, and I acknowledge that. I say, Lord, I'm weak in this area. It's hard for me to move forward. I need the strength of God to help me on this journey. That's when the divine exchange comes, that divine exchange of weakness for strength. But if we're going around walking boldly and proudly on the outside and being strong while inwardly we are struggling, we are delaying the strength of God in our lives. So when people rub you on the back and they tell you to be strong, you can be armed with this truth to let them know there is a strength available to me, and it's not my own strength. It's the strength of God that is made perfect only when I am weak. Only when I am weak. So for those of you that have worn that S on your chest and that you've been strong and you've held it together, I'm going to invite you to take that cape off. I'm going to invite you to take it off because there will be no award ceremony for the strong moms, for the strong dads. But what I will invite you also to do is to make that divine exchange for the strength of God for your weaknesses. So my question for you, and just think of it, if you're taking notes, you can just write it down. What myths have you accepted as truth? Just think about that for a moment. What is it that people have told you and you've accepted as truth for your life, and it has become your standard? Maybe I should be better by now. It's been 2 years, and you feel like you should be better by now because those that are supporting you are wanting you to be back to your old self. The truth is that we don't get to go back to who we were. We are forever changed, not just because our children died, but because of who we loved and how we have loved them. So think of what myths you have accepted as truth. And as we close tonight, I just want to share a few takeaways with you. So along your journey of grief, I want to give you permission to discover the truth of grief and how you apply it to your life. At the beginning, we talked about 4 definitions of grief. Think of what grief is and what truth is for you and how you will apply that to your life. The second takeaway is never apologize for your grief for the comfort of others. Your grief is as unique as your fingerprint. And you don't have to apologize for the intensity of your crying. You don't have to apologize for moving forward and finding a way to be happy. You don't have to apologize for still longing for another child 5 years later after your son or daughter has died. There are no apologies on this journey of grief. And lastly, my most favorite, grief is about love. Grief is not just about death. It is about love. I want you to be empowered and inspired to share the love that you have, even if it includes tears. Even if it includes tears. Thank you so much for allowing me to share these 4 myths of grief with you. I am honored, and I will be able to take some questions now if you have them. I will return back to the regular screen and open it up if anybody has any questions or comments that you would like to share.
Before we do that, real quick, because I'm gonna stop the recording. That way people can feel open to ask their questions, knowing that it won't show up online later. Before I do that, tell people where they can find you and reach you, that kind of thing, if they want to send you an email, ask you a question, that kind of stuff.
Sure. If you would like to find me on social media, I am on Facebook, and it's Tanika Dillard. I also have a page for my book. It is Building a Family Breaks My Heart. We can interact at either of those pages. And also you can send an email to Tanika at tanikadillard.com. That's Tanika, Tanika, at tanikadillard.com. I also have a channel on YouTube, which is Grievers Empowerment with Tanika Dillard. So feel free to find me at any of those places, and I would be happy and honored to support you on your grief journey.
Thank you so much, Tanika. I wrote down so much stuff. Let me stop recording here.